Well, Matt, it's so great to connect today. We've got a mutual connection that lined us up. I've been reading your work. I love it. And I look forward to learning from you and hearing, you've done a lot. And I'd love to hear what you'd most want to pass on to others from the work you've done.
Yeah. Well, first of all, are you sure you were reading about me and not someone else? I
I
don't
can't, I
think
mean, I can't be
I don't think I've
100%
done
certain.
that.
You,
Okay.
you've got a Wikipedia page, Matt.
From your mouth to my wife's ears. I've got a story for you. Um, the river that runs through it starts in about the year 2000. And I am a freelance reporter for the New York Times in San Francisco. And the Times calls and says, "Hey, would you like a full-time job?" And this is your dream scenario if you're a young journalist. And I say, not really, because I really liked how my life was going. And that seemed a little bit scary to me. And then the people who loved and cared about me said, "You're an idiot. Uh, why don't you interview with them and see what they say?" So I did. I'm going somewhere with this, Nate. You think I'm not going somewhere, right?
No, you're a storyteller. I know this is going somewhere.
It's going somewhere. So uh, they wind up saying, "Hey, we'd like to hire you, um, and you need to move to New York." And I had sensed this was coming, and I had spent a year in New York at grad school, and I had been extremely unhappy there. It is, I think that mostly I just really was insufficiently experienced to be doing what I was doing and largely scared out of my pants. And so I didn't sleep well. And also, there were lots of really ambitious, capable people there. And I thought that's not an environment that's going to do well for me. So I said to the Times, "I will work for you if you allow me to stay in San Francisco." And they said, "Okay, well, let's try it." Everything making sense until now, up to this point.
Hmm.
About a year later, they called and said, "Well, we've decided that we need to bring all the young reporters back to San Francisco, to New York. So you have until, um, let's see, October 1st, 2001, to be back in New York, or you're fired." And I flew back to New York that summer and I said, "Hey, how do you feel about, to a top editor, how do you feel about the work I'm doing?" And they said, "We love it." And I said, "I'm also happy. Can't we just keep things as they are?" And they said, "Well, I got news for you, kid. This is not about being happy. This is about the Stations of the Cross and doing what you need to do in this corporation to keep rising." And so I went back to San Francisco, where I was dating the woman who would eventually be my wife. And I was very happy. And I'd had my hesitations about living in New York, and they hadn't waned. And on October 1st, 2001, I sat at my home office in San Francisco and I waited for the phone to ring to tell me I'd be fired. And I kept working. And little by little, over the course of 5 years, with this axe hanging over my head, I went on to not just survive, but thrive at the New York Times. And eventually I won a Pulitzer Prize. And I did some work that I think many people would say was pretty able. And I'm telling this story for a reason, Nate. I ultimately stuck to something that was so core to me that giving it up would have meant losing the forest for the trees. I would have kept a job at the New York Times and been miserable. But the real punchline of this story is, I think a lot of my success that followed, including books that came from the heart, nonfiction and fiction, the work that succeeded at the Times, came from ultimately listening to the things most important to me. And the creativity that came out of that might well have been compromised had I gone into an environment that was too intense for me, too threatening, or just simply not right. And that is my story for you and my takeaway that I hope may mean something to somebody.
I love it. And I can relate a little bit. What a cool story. I mean, you just say no. I mean, it's the civil disobedience, the like I'm just gonna do my thing. You can choose whether or not you fire me, but I'm gonna stick to who I am. When I went to law school, uh, the reward for doing well in school for many people who don't know what they want to do is they go to law school because they get, it's like they've been rewarded their whole lives for being smart and getting good grades. And so they get to law school, and the reward for doing well in law school is this high paying, prestigious job that leads to a lot of drug addictions and unhappy lives. And
It's the liberal arts honey trap.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've never heard that phrase, but you've nailed it. And so I get there like, well, do I really want to be an attorney? Now, my dad's an attorney, my brother's an attorney. You can live a good life as an attorney, but many people don't. And so I just chose a different career path, which is fine. But your story of, you're going to get fired. You were expecting to get fired. Had you been
I
thinking like,
was
what am I going to do when they fire me?
All I knew is that I felt happy, and I had a sense that you don't mess with happy.
Interesting.
And I had known periods of unhappiness before, and I wasn't prepared to put myself in that situation. And maybe the other piece of this conversation is that that if you that happiness can be fragile. And I would mess with happiness, um, recognizing that it comes with big risk. Or to put it another way, don't mess with happiness unless there's a really good reason.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and that is what I would really want to impart to my kids, that if that's the context for this or some other people's kids or another generation, is that striving um, at the expense of core happiness is, I guess they're not mutually exclusive, in the sense that when I stuck to my core happiness, I was still able to strive, but in a context that meant a lot more to me.
Yeah.
I think that to the extent I've had success, it grew out of the ethos of staying true to myself.
A few months ago, I finished a book by Walter Isaacson. It was the biography on Steve Jobs, and he was doing an interview with somebody on a podcast, and they asked him for some writing tips, and he said basically anytime somebody asks him a question, he tries to respond with, "Let me tell you a story." And I love what you did today. I know we could talk for hours and days about writing techniques, but I asked you a question, and your response was, "Let me tell you a story." And it's such a great story that illustrates an important lesson. The tagline for this podcast is simple, practical, and underappreciated. And I think you just nailed it today, Matt. So, any final words as we wrap up here?
No, gratitude.